Hey, welcome everybody to Talking Niagara this morning. It is July the 8th. July the 8th, yep.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So, welcome everybody. This is Talking Niagara, and we are the talk show about the news impacting Niagara Falls. Not all of it in Niagara, but those things that are going on in the world should be taking note of. For example, growing speculation over whether the CCP may be subtly curbing Xi Jinping's unshakable grip in China.
Yeah, I will caution first of all that this is an opinion article, but in
Yeah.
this opinion article, the author
But
makes a very good argument that CCP leader, the Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping's power is slipping.
Yeah, but it's an opinion article, and as I do with all of these opinion articles, I go out and see what else is on the web. There's actually another one in the South China Morning Post. There's Carnegie Endowment for International Peace is saying the same thing. So it's not unique. It's not a unique Toronto Star opinion piece.
No, it's an opinion piece based on. If you read it, it's based on observations that are telling
Yeah,
be, because of the way in which communist parties work. In this particular case, Xi Jinping disappeared for a couple of weeks without explanation.
yeah.
And highest among them is the fact uh, that he has been his power has been reduced. Apparently, this week, evidence of power correction went public as the CPC, the Communist Party of China, officials rescinded Xi's absolute control over domestic and foreign policy, announcing new rules to standardize the establishment, responsibilities, and operations of of central committees, decision making, deliberative, and coordinating installations.
Yeah, the central committee.
Institutions, sorry.
Yeah, central committee has been a core of both the Chinese Communist Party and
Not installations, institutions.
yeah, it's been a core of the Chinese Communist Party anyway, and typically it's the main power body within the CCP anyway, as it was within the Russian Communist Party. So yeah,
Yes,
in a
but
way
there
that
are well, it's kind of like I don't know what particular leader you might want to uh, sort of compare it to. You might want to compare it to Khrushchev.
yeah,
Khrushchev was the after Stalin, he became the leader of the USSR, and throughout his career, he became sidelined actually, and kind of forced into retirement. But
yeah,
for a while, he was the dominant guy, and he,
yeah.
he called the shots.
And
Now,
pretty well
Xi
everything he
Jinping,
said at one point was law, right?
yeah. Now
Even if
that
he had said black is white, that would have been turned into law.
yes, but those kind of pronouncements are the things that get the hackles up, or make the rest of the party become aware.
Yeah,
Is he abusing his power, even within the communist system? Now it says here, I'll read the second paragraph after I said that. Translating the Bafflegab, General Secretary Xi Jinping is no longer China's unchallenged strongman leader, no longer the pilot at the helm who entrenched the one man power with on the claim that he was a necessity for the country. Now he um, uh, the head of the party is supposed to be changed every so often, as it had been in the past. Xi Jinping kind of decided that wasn't going to happen anymore. He was going to be
Yeah.
the the people's leader
Well, the
as long as he
Chinese,
wanted to be.
yeah, the
So
Chinese have changed
the
their leaders.
constitution, well, the political process that changed the leadership in China was dissolved under Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the Chinese have changed their leaders in the past, so they haven't done what was traditional in Russia, which was run your leader until he dies and then get a new one.
No, they actually had a process by which they chose a leader for every 5 years.
Yeah, and often
Xi
that would be
Jinping,
the same guy who would go on for, say, maybe 10, 15 years.
yes, this is not. Yeah, I mean, Stalin was, for instance, a guy like Stalin may have had those rules to oblige by
In the beginning.
officially, but he amassed amount of power and he would kill his rivals off in
Yeah,
purges.
yeah,
Xi Jinping has purged the CPC as well. He's taken out his old rivals that were aligned with previous leaders in the CPC, and got rid of them, usually under corruption charges. And because the CPC was rife with corruption from the very top to the bottom, Xi Jinping could target anyone he wanted with corruption and be well
yeah.
assured that he could find some corruption, particularly money and bucksheesh kind of thing, back
Yeah.
payments uh,
Well, a
in
lot gets
their
done with back payments, right?
yeah. So just about every leader in the CPC takes handouts. So every one of them
Yeah,
is terrified.
yeah,
So in order to keep their job, basically, was to line up with Xi Jinping unquestioningly.
yeah. But
Now,
of
this is
course,
happening in any authoritative state. We see this happening with Putin.
yeah,
Putin became pretty much elections started with elections, but that that was phony, and eventually he gained complete control. Has sort of show elections, and is only and once his political adversaries were under his control, then he went after the oligarchy. The oligarchy was the only other challenge to his power. And if you
yeah.
notice in China, they did the same thing. They went
But of
after the
course,
oligarchy of China, like the very distinguished, huge, successful businessmen and athletes were all
yeah.
sidelined and put under his control.
Of course, the one thing about China that's going on at the moment is they're grappling with an economic slowdown, um, increasing youth unemployment, and generally public dissatisfaction in China. Internal critics are seeing a rebalancing of power as a way to steady that ship, try and get economic growth back again.
Yes, and maybe maybe hints of that were motivated Trump and his
Yeah,
145% tariff against China, and insisting that China then phone him to make arrangements. Well, that never happened. It was the other way around. The Americans actually ended up phoning the Chinese. They're the ones that took the first step. So
yeah,
the so maybe the American administration figured this is farther along than they thought and underestimated the solidarity of the Chinese party when it came to domestic affairs. They may not have been united behind their their leader, but they were united around their objection to the bully tactics of the U.S. So we'll see what's going to happen there. It now the everybody will say, well, if Xi Jinping is power is being slipping, or he has to be moderated, that would be a good thing. Not necessarily. When authoritative states like that begin to break down and others take over, it could be worse.
Yeah. Well,
Whoever
you just
takes
don't
it,
know.
maybe.
Yeah. One of the things about somebody like Xi Jinping is that you kind of know what he's, whether you probably don't like him, but you know exactly what he's going to do. And that's a lot of what um, those that are dealing with economic, looking at economic stability of the world look at.
Yeah. Now, as a Rand Corporation summary puts it, consumer in China, consumer confidence is poor, external demand is brittle, is a brittle support beam, as Western governments consider protectionist measures, and China's GDP is no longer catching up with the United States. So there are cracks in the system, probably, and also the fact that Xi Jinping has insisted that he will, if not politically, but militarily, take over Taiwan. That could cause China's economy and everything to tumble as well. So we have a situation where we have bizarre real estate in China where they've built massive amounts of housing that people never moved into or
Yeah.
never were or the housing was never completed. And we hear stories all the time where people have invested in a condominium or an apartment and they never get their apartment finished. They're stuck holding the bag. They have money invested in it, and nobody finishes the huge real estate boom. It was an artificial real estate boom.
Yeah.
Also, different provinces in China are finding themselves economically stressed,
Well,
and it is.
one of the questions about a slowdown is always what is the impact upon the job market within China, within any country, right? When you get a slowing economy, I think you kind of, I always find myself asking what's happening with the job market. And it's saying there's one of the things is when I'm looking this up, it's saying that there's a lot of caution in the Chinese job market with slowing in hiring and investment as and many workers, especially young urban job seekers, are feeling squeezed by fewer opportunities and lower confidence in longer term career prospects.
Uh, yes, and I'll read this paragraph too because to it's very succinct, and I don't think I could reduce it any
Yeah,
paraphrase it any better. It says Xi's conspicuous. Now these are very important with um, demonstrative demonstrative shows of power, and these are disappearing for Xi. In this particular case, Xi's conspicuous absence from leadership functions, combined with the disappearance of laudatory titles like the people's leader, they're not using that anymore, suggests more
yeah,
of a figurehead than hands on leader. Newscasts no longer show Xi directing Politburo sessions with members dutifully taking notes. Instead, Premier Li Jian and political consultative conference chair Wang Ying are now seen chairing key meetings. That's very, very significant.
yeah,
That was not permitted before.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was
Because
Xi, 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 everything.
it looks like those people are kind of being groomed for power, doesn't it?
And also, in Xi was compelled to praise Chen Yun's economic work. He was one of the previous leaders, and his function within the leadership collectives of Mao and Deng, an obvious reference to the merits shared leadership. Unusually, the broadcast showed no applause for Xi's address. These are
Yeah,
little subtle, well, not so subtle indications that Xi's Xi's power is slipping,
Yeah. You
and
were
that's
talking
what outside observers have noticed.
Yeah. You were talking also about home development, particularly these high rise city areas that they're doing. And one of the things I noted by doing some out research around this is that debt laden developers in China are actually on very thin ice. So many are facing massive liquidity crises and triggering ripple effects through the entire section. And the government is selectively bailing out certain projects to prevent mass default from occurring.
Yeah, what it seems to me like the Chinese have not balanced their economy.
Yeah, yeah,
Their planned economy was based on exports. What they did not do is develop the domestic market. And if you
yeah,
compare it with the other great economic power of the world, the United States, I think over 70% of the economy is internal and domestic, which
yeah,
makes it a very stable economy. And only about 20 or 30% of it is export driven. China, on the other hand, is completely export driven, and they are facing, not just from the United States, from everywhere in the world, um, resistance to their export economy. Without balancing the economy as domestic and export, it makes it extremely vulnerable. The United States, on the other hand, has much more solidity because it has a domestic and export presence. But
yeah,
China is very vulnerable to waves in the economy because it is export driven, and people do not like the artificial valuation. Well, countries don't like the artificial valuation of the yuan and the tricky practices that China uses to enhance its export uh, economy. Now, if you're the Chinese people and you find that your standard of living is not raised or is raised only a little bit and then is stifled, you're going to be unhappy. There's no reason why the Chinese economy, domestic economy, has to be as stagnant as it is. It
yeah,
could be robust, but the Chinese have focused singularly on exports. And this is kind of like the same way that their population problem, when they addressed their population problem, they went to the extreme and went to one child policy, which has now put them in a burdensome situation where there are four grandparents for every one and only one grandchild. And this makes the Chinese population uh, heavily dominated by aging population, which is a burden to the population, the rest of the population. So they went to the extremes and zeroed in on a one child policy without thinking of the consequences,
well,
looking at only the short term results instead of the long
yeah.
term consequences. And I
I
think
think
the same thing can
actually,
be said. I think the same thing can be said for their um, economic plans. Lots of
the,
short term
the
pluses,
irony,
but not long term planning.
yeah, the irony here, of course, is that one of the things about that single child policy is I think it has a lot of benefit, but the trouble is, what it needed to be done was instituted via education rather than instituted by via, um, via enforcement.
Well, it's very, very difficult to change the Chinese cultural attitudes.
Yeah,
Before they put in the authoritarian one child policy, they uh, they found it extremely difficult to educate their population to reduce the number of children because in Chinese culture, large families, particularly peasant culture, large families were a source of wealth and
yeah,
security
yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
in the minds of the people. Now they're having now they see it. What they should have done was gone to a two-child policy. That would have been much better. The transition from a very aged population to a younger one would have been smoother, and
Yeah, a
without
two-child
raising.
policy. Yeah, a two-child policy would have been more balanced. It would have been replacing the current population.
Yes, and that's vital because you didn't want a population growth without more resources, but what you wanted to do was maintain the size of the population so it was
Yeah,
it could take care of itself. Right now, you have a what appears to be an aging population, then with a decreasing population. They're
and with a
follow.
lot of Chinese youth, of course, are leaving.
But not only that, it puts an awful strain on the younger population to now produce enough to support this aging population.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
there are just like in the we are much more aware of all the economic problems we have, or political and economic and demographic problems we have here in Canada. Even though we have a very very low fertility rate in Canada, we replace our population with people from other parts of the world. Um, so
All right.
we similarly have a problem where
Yeah.
for some reason we don't want to have children,
Hmm.
but but that puts an extreme strain on the economy and
Well,
puts a
I
lot of
think
burden on those younger on the economy.
yeah,
But we can get away with it with immigration.
yeah, and the thing is that Canada's system, there's nothing stopping you having 15 kids if you wish to, right? It's just we've gone to the onto that approach more by education than anything else.
Yeah, but also we have cultural trends now that um, uh, discourages us from having children. You got to have so much money. You got to have two people in the workforce, and the women do not want to be burdened with motherhood. Sadly,
Mm. Yep. All right. Okay. So Mike was saying, did we see the city council last night? And apparently they're supporting short-term rentals and Mike Strange, and basically, yeah, we'll be looking at that tomorrow, Mike. Because once we get the info off the news, we'll be talking about it, right?
yeah, I didn't see them. I was busy yesterday, but I didn't see the council.
Yeah,
Um, I
I
I
was
was
working last
interested
night.
though. Yeah, I was interested in some of these things that were coming up, and one of the things I was kind of amused at was Ruth Ann Newestag wanted the seniors and and minors to be able to use the buses for free, which is a good idea. But I was kind of amused only because she's a conservative and she's now touting social democrat policies by having free rides on buses.
Well, I suppose that is amusing, but it's an interesting concept. The question here is that I think it's vital, particularly for those two groups. But the question really is, can we afford it at this stage, given how low ridership is within our transit system?
When I discussed it on Paul's show, I say nothing free is very appreciated. Free people don't appreciate stuff that's free, so you have to pay something. If you pay a toonie every time you got on the bus, that's cheap, easily handled by everyone, even the lowest paid people. But it is it,
Well, in many parts of
it's not for free, but it's cheap. So I think probably you should be able to get on the bus for a loony or a toonie,
yeah.
something, uh, anything, any kind of small amount of payment.
Well,
Any,
but in many parts of Europe, um, when you get 65, when you get to 65, you get your free bus pass.
well, that's a little bit different.
Yeah,
Seniors can get a free bus pass, but I'm not even sure that's a good idea nowadays because the seniors make up so much of the population. If you want a revenue stream, maybe they should get the bus pass for half the price of the bus fare.
yeah.
Or if your bus pass cost $200 a month, then you can get it for $100 or maybe $50, but something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I get you, because what you're saying is giving it out. Giving it out means that people won't use it anyway.
Won't use it or abuse it.
Yeah.
Anytime you give somebody something for free, in their mind, it devalues it. Can't be
Yeah.
worth much because it's free.
And it's better to pay $25 a month for it
Yeah,
than
and
that.
you're
Yeah.
contributing something, even if your bus pass accounts for $200 worth of rides and you get them for $50, you're still getting a very good deal, and you're still adding something to the
To the
something
economy. Yeah. Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on. The Niagara man has allegedly stolen trailers, and he's marketing them on Facebook Marketplace. And he's wanted by the Niagara police. And he's basically um, he's several charges of stealing things over $5,000. And this is a gentleman, a 35-year-old local gentleman, who is selling stolen trailers for prices significantly below the market value, to unsuspecting buyers on Marketplace.
Well, this reminds
Weird.
me of a thief I knew and grew up and went to school with. His one of his schemes was to steal a car with a trailer hitch, and then or plates. Usually, he stole plates and put them on his car or a car that he stole with a trailer hitch. Then he would just cruise around different communities all over Ontario, basically, find a boat that was in somebody's driveway, just back up to it, hook it up, and take it away, and then sell it.
Well,
Uh,
most of the time, where most people would just assume, "Oh, hi, that's the maintenance guy. The guy over there was telling me about his boat problems, so he's taking it to the shop at last."
well, I remember talking to a guy, and I knew this was the MO of this guy. Uh, and I remember talking to a person. You know what I saw one day? I saw a big Cadillac with a trailer hitch go up uh, to my neighbor's a few doors down and hook up his boat and take off with it. I just assumed that it was a friend of his, but it wasn't the guy stealing it. And I knew who did it. I didn't say anything. The same guy stole uh, my brother's license plate and put him on his car so he could do some nasty stuff. And I knew that because they came to my
Yeah.
house
Well,
asking.
what?
You know, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say what they've got on here is they're describing what they've got is a 2022 North Star dump trailer with the decal plaza tenders on both sides.
Yeah, so it's a slick work. Is people what they do? And these are trailers, right? Trailers or boats or something like that. Are
These
generally
commercial
put in
trailers,
generally put in the guy's driveway
yeah,
and left there. So you don't think anything. You got your boat there, your trailer there, and what do? You don't put big locks on them or anything like that, do you?
because
So they are
nobody will take them.
vulnerable.
Yeah,
What? Go ahead.
and because you assume nobody's going to even think about taking them, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
So, anyway,
yeah.
if you got
So
a trailer, make it a little more difficult to haul away.
yeah. Put something underneath. There are some locks. There is some posts and locking mechanisms that you can get for those trailer hook ends.
Yeah, it's a sad thing.
Yeah,
So, okay, trailer thieves abound. Watch out for your boats. Too, motorcycles are an easy thing to grab. I knew a guy that stole motorcycles one time. He says it was the easiest thing he could possibly do. He had a truck. He had a little bit of a lifting device. Very mechanically minded. Just drive around, find a motorcycle, and within minutes he had it in the back of his truck, and he took it to his house and there stripped it down or sold it. And he eventually got busted, but he got busted for dope. And then when they came to look, they found all these motorcycles. Nobody even suspected he had them. He kept that secret from everybody else. But later on, when he described how he did it to me, wow, he really had a slick operation,
Yeah.
quick one man operation. So he was pretty mechanically inclined. He would he'd build all kinds of stuff. So he just would scoop a bike in minutes, and it'd be down the road. So if you and several other guys had motorcycles, you were in a bar back in those days, he could come along and scoop one or two of them real quick without anybody even knowing. But he usually picked ones he saw in people's driveways or something like that, because he was quick and he was fast. He operate mostly at night.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of people don't think that motorbikes is another area people don't think about security.
Well, they should, because they're easily grabbed, and
Yeah.
people who are in the know can get them quick.
Yeah. Okay, Mike says, be very careful. Yesterday, village on Crescent, a man and woman were acting like delivery people, tore a gold chain from a woman on her property. Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
geez.
yeah. It's just,
Yes,
yeah,
be very careful about that.
yeah. Yeah, we don't often cover crime, but the thing is, it is an unfortunate part of what, of our life.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's getting a little bit too personal. Stealing something that nobody's around and stealing it, but then going up to a person and ripping the chain off their neck, that's getting physical. And it can
Yeah.
even get worse if you got a lady with a purse or anything like that that can be hurt. So, I don't know. Crime levels, I don't know. It's just,
Well, actually, there was a thing that there was a spate of car thefts about 10 years ago, and I remember writing about this. And what the police more or less universally said is all across North America. And what was happening is people were kind of going to bed, leaving their front doors open, and inside the front door, there's kind of like a cabinet where they just stick the keys on their car keys on the cabinet. And
yeah,
in
well, there was also the idea that people could smash the door in really quick
Yeah,
and reach in and grab the keys, which was happening too. Even if it was
yeah,
locked, they'd smash the door, and it would take just a second to stick their hand around, grab whatever keys there, go out and take off with the car.
yeah.
And they would usually pick older people too. So if they did wake up and try to chase them, there's nothing they could do. So
Well,
yeah. Anyway, we have another crime article here, which we should talk about if we're talking about crime, and that's the human trafficking that's happening in Niagara, and the human trafficking efforts to develop a code of conduct for especially uh, especially hotel employees, to help them identify human trafficking. Because a lot of human trafficking happens through Niagara Falls because it is a tourist town with a lot of hotels and capacity that way. There's a group, basically,
there's always a group. Yeah,
yeah, and
that's where these things come from. Yes, a group of concerned citizens, and good.
tools of empower. It's called TOES, Tools of Empowerment for Success. And basically, what it is this project uh, is a nationwide strategy to and legal framework to combat human trafficking, but lacks the code specifically tailored to the industry that caters to tourists. What they want to do is to make sure, and they're already having some success here. What they want to do is have, uh, oh darn, that's blasted phone of mine. Anyway, what they want to do is have this code taught to tourist, uh, particularly hotel employees, on how to identify trafficking. What happens is young women, particularly, are trafficked and used as sex workers. They usually are afraid. Uh, Maybe there are immigrants or whatever else, but somehow these people have the power over them, and 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 abuse them almost like sex slaves. And what happens is, of course, in big tourist markets, you'll always have ample amount of people who want to take advantage of a prostitute or a sex worker, and these can be provided by these traffickers in large amounts. Now,
Yeah.
the traffickers, of course, are always in almost inevitably involved in drugs and other illicit, illegal activities, smuggling drugs, whatever. The uh, Now this is very important because this can help eliminate or
Well,
bring
they're
police
looking.
to bear on trafficking if your staff is trained to be observant.
Yeah. And that's the whole point. They're looking at training hospitality staff in hotels, motels, short term rentals to recognize signs of trafficking and respond safely. In other words, if you spot it, one of the things you don't do is actually confront them. What you do is report it to the right authority, um, who will then interview and take appropriate action.
Yeah, no, there is. Yeah, so this is missing. There is this code of conduct or code of, I suppose, education
Yeah,
for generally workers that is lacking. There isn't a solidified code, and that's why they want to make this particularly universal. Niagara can lead the way by initiating a code that many influence national adoption. Um, Kappas Vanna, who is the spokesperson here, told counselors recently before the endorsement. Now, a lot of the people that work in this area or help along this area seem to me that used to be previous victims of this
yeah, oh yeah.
human trafficking.
Often are because they're the people who know the tactics. They're the people who know what goes on. They're the people who've been through the process, so they can tell the story a lot more effectively than people like you and I can.
Now, I when I was on one of my trips, I was in Nepal uh, for about a week or so, and one of the places I visited was sort of a halfway house or for former Nepalese girls that had been seduced the into human trafficking.
Yeah,
They're not into human trafficking, but were victims of human trafficking.
yeah,
What happens is, in that case, the men would go to the village and promise these young ladies all kinds of jobs and husbands and prosperity. They would take them in the city, and the really good looking ones they would make into sex slaves, and the ones that probably were less in their minds suitable for the sex trade, they would use them for slave workers, work slaves, sweatshops, and stuff like that. And I
yeah,
suppose it depended on the demand. Somebody who owned a factory and needed slaves, basically slaves to work in the factory, would contact a trafficker. They would go out to the villages and bring the girls in. Next thing you know, the girls think they're going to get a nice job and everything. And what they end up doing is working in slave conditions with a bag of rice and no ability or idea how to get out of this loop.
yeah.
Of
And often living in the same building as they're working in.
Yeah,
So there's no opportunity to escape. The doors are all locked because often the authorities have found out about these places because they were burnt down in a fire and they found 100 people dead in the on the third floor above a factory where other people died.
well, that happened in the United States years ago too. But anyway, or even in
Yeah,
Canada. But when I was there, sadly I forget the name of the place. It starts with an S, and it's not in the Kathmandu. It's in the one of the other major cities. There's not too many in Nepal,
yeah,
but they anyway. I talked to the girls, or we and that went there. talk to the girls, and one was sex work, or not as some of them were sex workers, and others were that we talked to there were factory slaves. Basically, they were
Yeah.
forced to work for just enough to
Well,
eat.
this goes on in many of the poorest of countries. Places like Bangladesh has been, some sort of thing common, found in Bangladesh as well. And you're saying US and Canada. It doesn't surprise me in the least.
Well, years ago, I remember there were Channel 11, I think it was, many years ago when I was a kid. I mean, we're talking about 55 years ago. I remember watching on TV. What they would do is they would have um, dramatized show about dramatized court cases. In other words, they would change it would be this an exact court case that actually happened, and but the names were changed, and actually they just went into court and did what the other court what happened in real court, but just changed the names and put actors in their place to protect the people. And in that case, it was a Romanian woman who had been enticed to come to Canada and then forced to become a sex slave, sex worker, and she got arrested. And when she was telling her story about, arrested as a prostitute, and of course, when she told her story, it had all kinds of mitigating factors because it revealed that she had been more of a victim than a criminal.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. I didn't, of course, I'd be 11 years old or something when I was watching that, but I still remember it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So 11 places in Ontario that if you haven't been to at least five of them, you can't claim to be Ontarian, even if you were born here, right?
Uh, I don't know. I didn't even look over that list.
The Grotto,
The grotto.
Cheltenham, Cheltenham Badlands, Niagara Falls, Flower Pot Island, it's at Tobermory, Sandbanks Provincial Park, Bonachair Caves, Oymet Canyon, Scarborough Bluffs, yeah.
You mean not Queen? Not what was the canyon?
Oymet Canyon,
Oh, that's
Ouimet.
it. You're thinking, is that a Q? Queement Canyon? Or,
Maybe it is Quemet Canyon. It's an O in the article.
that would be the one up in northern Ontario, just
Yeah, it is in
on the
Northern
northern.
Ontario. Yeah,
Yeah, it would be
yeah,
northern Lake Spear. I've been to that one, Quemet Canyon.
yeah. Kakabeka Falls,
No, I don't know.
Elora.
I haven't been to many of these.
Well, you must have been to Scarborough Bluffs.
Yes, of course. I lived in Scarborough. Yeah,
Yeah, Elora Quarry.
Alora Quarry. I've driven past. I haven't walked through it.
Yeah. Well, I was a couple of those Tobermory ones. I've driven past them. Didn't even know the grotto was there. Agawa Canyon is the other one.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? There's a good point there. Absolutely there like almost none of them I've been to, but I've heard of them, but never went there.
Yeah, yeah, and like this one, the grotto, for example, gives an address at Cypress Lake Road, Tobermory. Um, yeah, I was actually in Tobermory a few years ago. Didn't know that existed.
There you have it.
Yeah, and possibly even if I'd have seen a sign on the road, I might not have stopped in anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
it's there's some amazing things in in Ontario. We remember we're a country-sized province, for crying out loud.
yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah, I
we
know.
would be a significant sized country all on our own.
Yeah. Where was the other one? I think Flower Pot Island's also in Tobermory. Yeah, 121 Cheesin Tib Deck Road in Tobermory. and basically this is a rock that's standing out of the out of on the off the shore on a lake, and it's called Flower Pot because it looks like a flower pot, I guess.
Yes. Well, there's also Kojiko Studios on McLeod Road. That's very famous because there's a very famous bingo caller, Dave Wheeler, who frequents
All right.
that during.
I'm more interested. I'm more interested, to be quite honest, in listening to the lady who talks about the seniors stuff. Who goes there as well? What's her name now?
Ms. Fraser. Ms.
Karen Fraser, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, the reason why I kind of intruded with that is that we might find it looks very positive. I was at a meeting yesterday that we're going to have 6 games instead of 4 on our bingo coming up, and
Oh.
our show is going to last a half an hour longer.
Oh.
And the reason why
So
Kojiko wants us to do that is because of the popularity of bingo. So they for that slot on Sunday it is filled with bingo because it's the most popular thing that happens.
so when
On
you come back, this is the new thing for when you come back from your summer break.
that looks like it, yeah. So we
Yeah.
had a meeting how to accomplish that yesterday with
Okay,
all
that's a
the.
good. That's a good. I presume the prices of the tickets are going up.
It might not have to, not
Oh.
least for the first year. uh, what we try to do is instead of having 600, and $1,200 prizes, we'll give people more of a chance to win 500, 500, 500, 500, 5 games of 500 and 1 game of 1,000.
Okay. Okay. All right. So it's just reassigning how the price, where the prizes, how the prizes are calculated.
Yeah, it just gives two
Yeah.
more two more chances to win. And since all the tickets are already printed for $4, and we'll just have to see how that works. If we have to boost the price. But right now it's $4, and we don't really want to raise the price because like.
No, I know because the prices. A lot of people kind of are looking out on that. Especially older people. They're using that $4 as, yeah, I'll buy the bingo ticket or watch it on Sunday night, and we'll be playing that game. You know,
Yeah,
the hope is that they get the $1,000. So they
yeah,
jump
but
for joy. They jump for joy when they get any other.
yeah, if you get $500, it certainly helps.
Yeah,
And the chances are very good. Just about everybody I know that's played bingo has won it if they win it, if they play it steadily.
yeah.
So I know. Uh, Geez, yeah, I
So
would have to say that everybody I know personally has won more than once.
so Dave, can you give me the bingo numbers in advance so I can go buy the right look through the tickets available and buy the right one?
No, I've been asked that before. Is there chances of cheat? Would we cheat? And I would say, look, the prize table is $4,000. We won't cheat unless it gets up to 10,000. We have standards.
There's even cheaters have standards. Yes, I get it. Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, that's good. And yeah. Okay. So
So
talking.
there's the trafficking thing is a sad thing, but I think any amount of public awareness,
Yeah.
particularly with the employees. And
Well,
we're look like we're going to get a raft of of trafficking coming up because of FIFA.
yeah.
FIFA comes to North America, right?
Next year's
Yeah.
World Cup. Yeah,
So
it
they're
takes
they're
place. It takes place in mainly in the United States, but there's two places. It's in Toronto and Vancouver, and it's also in three places in Mexico. Although,
yeah,
given the current status of of the world, there's a lot of people asking whether it should be continuing in the US.
well, you know what? You can't. I have a large problem with that. You don't want to, like, the athletes themselves have worked very hard to get to
I
a
know
certain
they have.
point, and do you and the people who appreciate soccer, you really want to punish them for the actions
Oh, you don't
of
want to
their
punish them. No, no.
it.
Yeah,
Maybe at certain times, political pressure that way is can make a difference, but most of the time, all you're doing is punishing the fans and the athletes,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
it makes it only makes and it's inconsequential, but it makes the government look big.
Yeah,
So anyway, FIFA's coming to North America, and that's going to be a wide open call for human trafficking. So it says here, with the FIFA World Cup coming to Canada next year, Niagara will experience a major influx of international visitors into hotels, short-term rentals, and tourism, and that will increase the risk of trafficking.
yeah. It
Obviously,
will. It will. That's for sure. And now's the time to start training and educating and prepping for that sort of stuff.
yes.
All right.
Unfortunately, that happens, and there's a and it's been happening for years and years and years. Like I said, when I was back in the exploit of the people who were exploited back in those days were people from Europe, particularly Eastern Europe, who
Yeah.
escaped communism, got a promise to bring them into the country and help them start, and then found themselves to be either sweatshop slaves or sex worker slaves.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So moving on. Um, there was a flood in Texas a couple of days ago, that killed dozens of campers in a campsite, kids campsite, and it's caused a rash of kind of, hey, what should we do to make sure the campsites are safe?
Well, this surprised me a lot because it was on a floodplain. It was in a flood risk area. Now, other camps close in and around that were under had places where the kids slept that were in higher ground.
Higher ground, yeah.
Um, there was
So you're
one camp
playing the
there
low
where
ground, so you go up
somebody.
high. Yeah,
There was one camp there where somebody noticed the rising waters and got everybody out. Recognized the risk, but the other one's not. For one thing, that camp should not have been there.
yeah.
If you really think of it, that camp should
Well,
not have been there. If anyone
yeah,
really thought of it at any one time, when flood risk, and that is a risk in that area because everything's so dry. So when they do get a massive amount of water coming down, it doesn't get soaked into the ground. It just kind of crashes,
yeah.
comes down in a big flash flood. Um,
Well, you've
and
got to also think about. It doesn't matter where the campground is. We're talking about one in Texas, right? Texas Hill Country, and you've got to. If your kids are going to a camp, think about how safe that camp is, right? Before sending them to the camp.
well,
I think
uh,
it's a key
we're
story here.
yeah, because right away, parents are going to be very, very reluctant, or that's going to absolutely be in everybody's back of everybody's mind. Is the camp that I sent my kid to going to be safe?
Yeah, yeah.
Almost all the camps are very safe and have safe procedures and are put in places that are not vulnerable. Like for instance, in a place like Florida, you have to look out for tornadoes and in the Midwest, hurricanes or tornadoes. Even in Ontario, depending on where they are, they have to be um, educated on what a tornado look like, what they're going to be. They have to have safe
Well,
places for
at
the
least
kids
the
to
one
go.
at least the one thing about hurricanes in places like Florida, they're not going to pop up in an instant. It's not going to. It's going to take It's going to take days. You're going to be aware they're coming.
Well,
Whereas
one of the
thunderstorms and tornadoes are different.
yeah, there's always been incidences, but there's 99% of the camps in and around Ontario, anyway, I'm sure in most of the parts of the U.S., are very safe, and the camps have been chosen for a good, a good locations and a safe locations, and the vulnerability of them has been taken into consideration. Like that one that was in the Texas country where the kids did not go to the low level. There was a high level place where they could go to sleep just in case of an incident like that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, somebody didn't think about it. You know, you got a camp that runs year after year after year, and then somebody comes along and says, you know what, you're on a floodplain, you're at risk of being flooded here. Well, it's never happened before, so it's hard to convince people. Another accusation that's come out here is a lot of the government workers that may have been able to predict this were laid off or dumped by Doge or the government to reduce their debt. When they went through the government and chopped all these jobs, some of them were weather related. And there is an indication that one of the persons that was in charge of early warning was offered a buyout to get out, or else he would have been shut out. And he took the buyout and left, but they weren't replaced.
Yeah.
That should be investigated. Now, the reason I'm a little bit anxious about that is, will they use it for political purposes rather than objective purposes? Will the
Hmm.
left say, well, if this person was not dismissed, these people would not have died? They don't know that. They want to apply
You
that, but
you actually don't know
the
that.
right would say that this has no bearing on it at all. So
Well,
we
in
need
fact,
an
actually,
independent investigator to see if laying off this person or getting rid of that
yeah.
position endangered those kids.
Okay, so Mike is saying by the time the officials were warned, it was already 2 hours into the disaster. So
Yes, and since some of the disaster apparatus was dismantled by Doge and the government, was that part of what made those
yeah, but
children vulnerable? Would
what you
that
don't
would that
know,
disaster would that disaster warning have come quicker if those
yeah,
people hadn't
but
been?
what you don't know is that guy might have been off sick that night.
Yeah, but he would have had a replacement, anything. But anyway, they don't look like day by day, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, but seriously, was it the problem? That problem, and there's serious questions about that. I think basically the camp was in the wrong area. Those camps were in the wrong area. They were in a flood risk area, and even if there hasn't been a flood there for 100 years, it's still vulnerable to a flood because because of the nature of of where it was in the low area that it was. It's very, very sad that nobody picked up on that. And yet other camps had and understood that you had to be in a higher location, at least when you're sleeping at night. Because
Yeah,
during
it's
the
all
day,
very well.
during the day, you could see stuff coming. And the
Yeah.
one camp there, somebody did notice the rising waters and something up, so he got everybody out and got everybody up to higher ground. But
Yeah, but
others
that's
so lucky.
more luck than anything else. An early warning system is only as good as it only goes so far.
Yeah, well, the bottom line here, I think, basically that camp was in an at-risk area, and like
Yeah.
you say,
Yeah.
if there happens to be a flash flood there in 100 years, it's still vulnerable to a flash flood.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that what should have happened is they should not have been allowed to build the dorms down that low.
Yeah, it's all hindsight 2020.
Yeah.
And as I said before, if a camp functions there happily for many many years, and then somebody comes along and says, "Oh no, you got to move it to higher ground," and all this, and we've never had an incident. And somebody comes on, probably 10, 15 years ago, probably somebody told them, probably many people have told them, look, this is not a good place, it's vulnerable. 10 years go by and everybody thinks, oh, what a bunch of hoo-ha, and then it happens.
Yeah. Well, it could have been 50 years going by and then it happened, but it doesn't make it any less a risk. And
Yeah, it's a
it's
very
better,
sad thing.
yeah,
It's
it's
still
better to walk half a mile to go up to a higher camp than to be flooded out.
yeah, or just pick your location better where you have access to the lower areas,
Yeah,
but you when you collect as a group for sleeping or eating or whatever, you're in
yeah.
a safer place.
Go in
But
the
I
same.
don't know. You can't lay judgment on this because we weren't there.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's an extraordinary tragedy, and the thing that bothers me is it may have been avoided if they didn't chop these individuals that were part of the meteorological infrastructure that was there that was meant to warn people. The person they were talking about when of course, I didn't etch the details in my memory, but the person that they dismissed out of the area or got rid of, took the buyout, was responsible for more than just one area. He was responsible for a large area where they could bring early warnings to. But whether or not that would have made a difference if you stayed in place or not, that has to be investigated
Yeah. All right.
independently.
Yeah. Independent investigations are important, and yeah,
No,
there were a few lives lost there. I don't exactly know how many,
there's
Betty.
over 100 now, over 100 dead,
Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
and many children. Oh, so sad.
It's because of the large number of children that makes this so devastating.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Kids going to summer camp. Like I went to summer camp. I had a lot of fun. And anyone who has gone to summer camp knows it's fun. And to look to see
Well,
these kids just hours before that were having lots of fun and with
okay.
other
Mike,
kids. And
Mike is saying 161 missing.
oh boy,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you went to summer camp, you had a lot of fun, you learnt skills like kayaking and things like that.
sure,
Right.
cooperation.
Yeah, exactly. Teamwork.
You come back with confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't that's one of the things we don't have in Britain is organized summer camps like this.
Well,
Right.
you're going to have to start going now, then, Peter. You're a bit old, but they'll accept you.
Well, I was going to say one of the things that but I was fortunate actually at the school I went to where they did actually have something, not summer camps per se, but they had activities where we could go canoeing and things like that. We did a number of things. So we'd turn up at school on our off days, and then we get taken by bus to somewhere and do some activities for the day.
Oh, that's like a day camp. We had day camps in Scarborough too. As a matter of fact, our club is supporting the YMCA day camps here for children that can't afford it,
Yeah.
and so we put up $5,000, $5,400 or something like that to 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 support children so they can
Well,
go to
good.
day camp.
Yeah, good. All right. Kind of, it's gone 8 o'clock. So I think we can kind of leave it at that.
Yes, everyone, and there's all kinds of stuff going on in the world, but there's lots of stuff happening here. And thanks for listening. But I just remind you, Netanyahu is pulling the ear. Netanyahu. We'll talk about it a little bit more
We're
tomorrow.
talking tomorrow. Yeah.
But I just don't want anybody to forget Gaza. It is an atrocity going on. It is a genocide, in my view. Um, and oh my God, I can't believe the kind of things that are happening there in full view of the world. Anyway, without further ado, I bid you adieu.
And have a good day.